Hello friends, welcome to the channel Vales and Tales. Today we will study a new literary movement which is Building Roma. Building Roma is a German word and wherein Bildung mean formation and Roma means novel. So these are called the novel of formation or novel of education or novel of growth. So these novels actually traces the growth of the protagonist, not only the physical growth but mental growth, emotional growth, social growth, intellectual growth. So these are also called coming of age novels. Now, the first Building Roma novel was actually Christopher Martin Wieland's The History of Agathon, which was published in 1766-67. But which novel popularized this movement, or which novel popularized this genre? It is John Goethe's Wilhelm Miser's Apprenticeship. And Wilhelm Mister is the name of the protagonist, and this novel traces his growth, his learnings that he has undergone as an apprentice. So that is why the novel Wilhelm Mister's Apprenticeship, which was written in 1795. Now, more than any other type of novel, the Bildungsroman intends to lead the reader to greater personal enrichment as the protagonist journeys from youth to psychological or emotional maturity. Now the reader is completely into the novel. The audience is not the passive receptor. He is actually actively participating in the novel as he is going through or as he is reading the personal growth of the protagonist. Now this growth occurs according to a pattern traditionally, right? What happens that there is a sensitive intelligent protagonist who leaves his home, undergoes stage of conflict and growth, is tested by crises and love affairs, then finally finds the best place to use his/her unique talents. While reading this, the novel which is coming into my mind, it is Pamela, or The Virtue Rewarded, right? Where it traces the story of Pamela. Then Joseph Andrews of Henry Fielding, right? Perfect example of Building Roma. Now sometimes the protagonist returns home to show how well things turned out. Some Buildings Roma end with the death of the hero, leaving the promise of his life unfulfilled. Traditionally, English novelists complicate the protagonist's battle to establish an individual identity with conflicts from outside the self. Now German novelists typically concentrate on the internal struggle of the novels. So English novels actually talk about the struggle which is taking place outside their self. That is that how society is giving them challenges which the protagonist is enduring. But the German novels usually concentrate on the internal struggle of the hero. Now the protagonist's adventures can be seen as a quest for the meaning of life. Here we can trace this their quest for the meaning of life, or as a vehicle for the author's social and moral opinions as demonstrated through the protagonist. Now the building drama was especially popular until 1860s. Its German affiliation, however, caused anti-German sentiment during the world wars to contribute to the demise of its influence, along with the emergence of a multitude of modern experiments in novel writing. Nonetheless, although it lost its popularity during the world wars, but we still have many people who are writing in this genre. And if you talk about a modernist age novelist, it is James Joyce, who has written very famous and popular Building Roma, which is a portrait of an artist as a young man in 1916. And the genre has continued to be adopted with distinguishing variations by writers of many nationalities, right? Now, who were the representative authors? Then we have Charlotte Bronte. Okay, you all know Charlotte Bronte, who has famously written Jane Eyre, which is an excellent example of the female building Roma. Then we have Charles Dickens, who has written David Copperfield, Great Expectations. These all are the works of building Roma. Then we have Goethe, of course, we have just read Wilhelm Mister's Apprenticeship in 1795. Then, of course, James Joyce, a portrait of the artist as a young man. Then we have Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann is the German novelist, you have to remember. And his masterpiece, The Magic Mountain, was written in 1924 and is a building Roma. And later work, Dr. Faustus, right? So we have Sylvia Plath, all Sylvia Plath. Her semi-autobiographical novel, The Bell Jar, is a building Roman, although it does not closely follow all the usual building Roma convention. But still we can consider this work as a building Roma novel. Now, Mark Twain, you all know Mark Twain, the American novelist. His famous novel and the classic of American literature, The Adventures of a Huckleberry Finn, which was published in 1885, is actually a picaresque and satirical building drama. Then we have Christopher Martin Wieland, The History of Agathon, which is considered to be the precursor to Goethe's novel, and which is considered to be the first novel in this building drama genre. Now, these are the representative works that you all have to read: The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Great Expectations, Invisible Man, The Bell Jar, Jane Eyre. You may have read many novels. Jude the Obscure, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Sons and Lovers, Wilhelm Mr. Stapleton's Ship, and Of Human Bondage. Of Human Bondage is also an autobiographical building drama of this American author, W. Somerset Maugham. Now, let's read this novel, okay? Let's have the analysis of this novel. Wilhelm Mister's Apprenticeship. This is Goethe's work, which was published in 1795, and this prototype of the building drama was translated into English by Thomas Carlyle in 1824. Okay, now this is very important because he's a German novelist, right? So he has written this work in German only, but this work is translated into English by your famous Thomas Carlyle, right? Whose work Sartre's Taylor Retailored is very famous in 1824. So it was published in 1795 in German, but in English it happened in 1824. So with this book, Goethe established the building drama as a novel of personal rather than philosophical development for the main character. His hero wanders through a series of love affairs, friendships, and occupations before settling down to marriage and responsible adulthood. All right. So it's the growth from immaturity to maturity. Okay, from a reckless life to a responsible life. Now, we all in some way or the other has undergone all these features in our life as well, right? So you can easily remember these novels also. Now, Goethe's model was emulated by many notable writers and has had a strong influence on the development of the novel. So what are the themes of these novels? Coming of age and apprenticeship, which is also your internship. The protagonist is able to find his unique talent, he is able to discover his own self. So identity and the self. Journey, of course, the protagonist undergoes a journey or a quest. He leaves his home, and then through all the adventures he learns so many things about his own self, right? So in a way, his personal journey initiates change, and this change brings growth. Then of course, love, education, search for the meaning of life. Now this is important, movement variations. This you have to remember, that the American style of the building drama is a combination of the German building drama and the Spanish picaresque. Now, the American building drama follows the pattern of moral growth for the protagonist as he discovers his identity in conflict with social norms. Blended into the story is the picaresque elements of the hero being as a traveler who has an outsider's perspective on what he encounters. Two American classics exemplify this structure: Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn and J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I hope you must have read all these novels. These are very beautiful novels. And so American novels, what they do, they actually combine the German building drama and the Spanish picaresque. Then of course, you know what is picaresque novel. Picaresque novel is actually Spanish in origin, and which tells you a humorous tale about the adventures of a roguish hero. Roguish hero matlab the hero who wanders from place to place and do lot of adventures. Now, the first known picaresque was the anonymously published novel Lazarillo di Tormes. The popularity of picaresque novels spreads to Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, as exemplified by classics such as Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders, which was published in 1722. So this is also one form of building drama. Then in English building drama, we all have read about Charles Dickens and all other novels, which are the novels of self-education, wherein the character or the protagonist moves from his provincial home to an urban setting. Okay. Now this is important. Entwicklungsroman. Now what is this Entwicklungsroman? Now this is another name for building roman, wherein the novelist actually traces the development of the protagonist. Now this name applies to novels constructed to follow the personality development of the protagonist. However, it is sometimes reserved for only those works that describe the hero's physical passage from youth to maturity, So what's the difference between Building Roman and Wix-Lung Roman? This is the difference, that these novels usually describe the hero's physical passage from youth to maturity, right, with or without delving into his psychological progress, right? In other words, Building Roman type novels that pay less attention to the hero's intellect and emotions, right? So herein the focus is not on the intellect and emotions of the hero, but rather on his physical growth from youth to maturity. So this is Entwicklung Roman, right, which doesn't take into consideration the emotional or intellectual growth of the protagonist, but only the physical growth. So this is the difference between Entwicklung Roman and Bildung Roman. Now another term which is important, Erziehungsroman. Now what is this Erziehungsroman? Meaning novel of education. This variation is a more pedagogic form of the Building Roma. Not only it is more concerned with the formal education and training of the protagonist, but this novel also intends to teach certain lessons about values to the reader as well. So it is majorly focusing on the education and training of the protagonist, So this is your Erziehungsroman. So this is the physical growth. Entwicklung Roman, this is his formal education. Okay, the focus is on formal education, so it is Erziehungsroman. Now the female protagonist, the Building Roma, which actually talks about the journey of the female characters like Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre. Then another term that you have to remember is Kunstler Roman. Now what is this Kunstler Roman? Herein there is a growth of the protagonist, there is development of the protagonist, and the protagonist is always the artist. So it talks about the growth of the artist. Now in this case, the protagonist achieves a place and opportunity in which to practice his or her art. Thus, graduating from apprenticeship not only ends the formative stage of life but also establishes the destiny that the hero has sought. For example, Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past, James Joyce, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus are example of this type. So here is, you see the development of the artist. Now medical subgenre and military subgenre, social protest subgenre, and of course Zeitroman, which is another term. Now this variation of the Building Roma blends the development of the era in which the hero lives with his or her personal development. So this is important. Here the writer or the novelist is not only talking about the development of the protagonist or development of the hero, but also the development of that particular age, right, in which the protagonist is situated or in which the story is taking place. All right, so development of era. The protagonist thus serves as a reflection of his or her times. It also talks about their times, what are the changes that are being happening in their times. This type of novel provides an interesting study of the effects of historical context on character. For example, if someone from Gaza or if someone in Ukraine writes a novel of these scenario, of this present scenario, so they will also talk about what these war is doing to their personal life, how it is impacting their family, how it is impacting their personal growth. So it can be read as Zeitroman, okay, wherein there is not only the personal development but also the development of that particular surroundings, right, which inhabited the character. Now this type of novel provides an interesting study of the effects of historical context on character. For example, Stephen Crane, he is an American novelist. The Red Badge of Courage dramatizes the effects of being a Civil War soldier on the protagonist, right? This is your Zeitroman. Do remember these variations, okay? So Entwicklung Roman, the physical development. Erziehungsroman, formal education of the protagonist. Kunstler Roman, development of the artist. And Zeitroman, development of the era also in which the hero lives, right? So historical context is important, that the modern novel developed in England with Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, right, and Moll Flanders 1722. These works were followed shortly by Samuel Richardson's Pamela. They're actually talking about the development of the novel. And Henry Fielding's The History of Tom Jones, A Fondling. These novels were highly episodic, plot-driven stories. And in Germany, the novel began with Wieland when he wrote the history of Agathan. Then, of course, you are Goethe, his Wilhelm Mister's apprenticeship, and the term Bildungsroman. This is very important. Was coined in 1817 by Karl von Morgenstern. Okay, remember his name. He's also called the father of Bildungsroman. Okay, because he has coined this term in 1817, but not commonly applied until about 1870. So this genre was popularized in the late 19th century, although it was coined in the early 19th century but popularized in 1870. The genre flourished through the middle decades of the 19th century, both in England and the United States. The historical novel developed by Sir Walter Scott was written also by Dickens and others. The popularity of Bildungsroman genre waned in the early 20th century, but variations of the form continue to be written throughout the 20th century. Although its popularity declined, but we can still traces the elements of Bildungsroman in certain novels of 20th century as well, where we have seen the novel of James Joyce, the portrait of the artist as a young man, right? Okay. So this is all about your Bildungsroman. I hope you are able to understand. Now you have to remember these things. Okay, make a chart in your notebook like this and like this. Just write here Bildungsroman. Here write Kunstlerroman. Here write Zeitgeroman. Here write the Irvingsung Roman. Then write about their features. Okay, that it is the novel of growth or formation, which focuses on everything: intellectual, emotional, physical. And Kunstlerroman, it is the growth, or it is the development of the artist. Okay, now it talks about the development of era as well, along with the development of the character, right? Then Enstelwang Roman, whatever, it talks about the physical development of the character majorly. Okay, only talks about the physical development of the character, right? Of course, we forgot the Irving-Roman. Irving-Roman is your formal education. So this is all about Bildungsroman. Make your notes and remember them, and do read all these novels. These are very important novels. It will help you in other way also, not only for remembering Bildungsroman, but in your other fields as well, when you will read your Victorian age or romantic age or modern age. Okay, so thank you so much. We will see you in the next video.